Brought in our panel tonight to discuss what we saw during the vice presidential debate. We have three locals joining us live with their reaction to tonight's debate. We have political contributor Richard Allen Bowler from Bakersfield College representing the Democratic Party. We have Robin Walters, and Matthew Martin, of course, is representing the Republican Party tonight. Thank you all for joining us. I do want to dive right in and begin with the overall tone of the debate. How do you think the candidates did as far as composure and making their case to the American people? Robin, we'll start with you.
Well, it was certainly a welcome change. I think both were more respectful. I thought Vice President Pence did continue to interrupt the moderator again, but certainly on a much less severely than Trump. I think the mansplaining, though, was a little bit difficult sometimes, where he tried to ask questions of Kamala Harris rather than let the moderator do it. But other than that, I thought at least through the tone and the issues, and I did think the moderator was spot on with some, really pointed questions about what's happening in this country.
And Matthew?
Well, yeah, I think, Robin, in answer to that, because Kamala Harris would not answer a very simple question as to whether she supported packing the court. Of course, FDR did try to do this years ago, but I thought they were respectful of each other. I do believe Senator Harris got more time. Senator Harris got more time, I think, to speak oftentimes, but the vice president laid out a great track record on what the president's done. 11 million new jobs already since COVID, 500,000 manufacturing jobs, 7.2 million jobs since he's been in office pre-COVID. So he laid out a great track record of what they've done and what they want to do next.
Now, of course, there was much clearer information tonight with much less interruptions. Now, there has been some criticism that we've seen online that neither candidate was really answering questions directly. Mr. Bowler, I want to ask you, do you agree with that sentiment? And despite them not answering the question, do you think they put out enough information to the American people?
Yeah, I'm not totally sure I agree 100%. I mean, I do agree there were times when they sort of deflected or they would return to a previous question that they felt they hadn't been fully able to answer. But I actually think, as far as debates go, this was a good one. And I felt they both gave pretty substantive answers. They both, almost, not always, but that they both were trying to address real policy questions and to articulate real policy differences. And I think they did. I mean, I enjoyed watching it, and I hope my students were watching it because I think it was a good example of what one of these debates should be like.
Now, another topic of discussion, of course, Senator Kamala Harris's facial expressions while up on the split screen. And then, of course, Vice President Mike Pence, sometimes speaking over the moderator or over Senator Harris. I'd like to hear briefly from each of you about whether or not you think that hurt or helped or was indifferent to the candidates. Robin, we'll start with you on that question.
As I indicated, I think the mansplaining, most women are not unfamiliar with the notion of men talking over them or interrupting them. I wasn't really bothered by the facial expressions. I think she was just her composure, even when he spoke things that were not true and continued to interrupt. But I would agree overall, I think they were both much more respectful of each other and the process.
And Matthew?
Yeah, I think that they certainly were more respectful of each other. There were a few times that they continued, of course, past their time. But again, as we talked about a little bit after the first debate, these are important issues, and records and facts matter. And so I think overall, they both got their vision out of what they want for the country. And it's very clear that Mr. Pence's and Mr. Trump's agenda and what they want to see happen to the country is continued tax cuts for the middle class, getting back on track after the coronavirus, creating millions of new jobs. He just signed the Great Outdoors Act, 1.3 million new acres in preservation for the environment. And in contrast to Senator Harris's and former Vice President Joe Biden's plan, it's a stark contrast. And I think that they laid out that tonight, and I think the American people will see that.
Alan, do you want to weigh in on that as well?
Yeah, well, I think the original question was, the kind of the facial expressions, would that help or hurt? It was not going to matter. I mean, it's the kind of thing that we might talk about on Twitter or we might talk about on social media, but both sides are going to look at it through their own lens. Supporters of President Trump are going to think that those things benefit him. and the opposite is going to be true for supporters of President Biden
I
or
do.
Vice President Biden.
Yes, and I do want to talk about, there were obviously multiple topics that were discussed tonight: the economy, the coronavirus pandemic, whether or not there's systemic racism in this country. Do you feel like there was a particular place that your respective candidates shined and that the opposing candidate failed to give a clear answer? And Matthew, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think on the Supreme Court, there's several, but on the Supreme Court, it was very clear. Look, Vice President Pence said, "Yes, I stand with the sanctity of life." Senator Harris repeatedly, they've supported abortion up to the date of birth, or as it's sometimes been coined, after-birth abortions, which is just simply murder. I think that was a very clear contrast. Also, at the very end, when he talked about bringing everybody together, and let's continue down a path of more jobs, more prosperity, $2,000 more in every American's pocket because of the Trump tax cuts. I think he did a great job, but especially on those two things I just mentioned.
Robin?
I think there were a number of things. One, of course, COVID-19. It goes without saying that the ineptitude of this administration has cost, over 200,000 lives and over 7 million people sick. The economy, 1 in 5 businesses closed. So I think it's clear that the Biden-Harris ticket has an actual plan to fight coronavirus. The assertion that Trump closed the border with China is absolutely false. He only closed it to people who were not citizens and didn't include Hong Kong or others. He completely misled the public. And I think her comment that they have forfeited the right to re-election was absolutely spot on, based simply upon their COVID-19 response. But I also think she addressed the economy, the whole notion that no one who makes under $400,000 a year will see a tax cut. That's a fact. It is verifiable. So Matthew can laugh, and he luckily called them Mr. Trump and Mr. Pence, because God willing, on November 4th, that's what they'll be. Mr. Trump and Mr. Pence, not president or vice president. Finally, I think on the systemic racism issue, I think the American people have come to terms with, we do have institutionalized racism, and we need to address that and come to terms so that we have fairness and justice for all. Because I am, like Kamala Harris indicated at the end, hopeful and positive that the American people overall want a fair country. They don't want racism. Most people are good people, just like most cops are good cops. Those things are all true, and those things we can all agree on. So I was really happy to see that at the end.
And Alan, I want to ask, was there a clear winner tonight?
I think that both sides are going to come away feeling happy. I really don't feel like there is going to be a kind of consensus winner. If I had to guess the way that the polls are going to score it, I think they may go a little bit more for Harris. But I think it's going to be close, and I think both sides are going to be able to kind of credibly claim big victory. And there will be moments that both sides will point to. The kind of dodging on the court packing issue is going to be one of those things that was a dodge. But then on the other hand, there were moments where it felt like Vice President Pence had kind of trouble coming up with like real good answers to things. So I think both sides are going to feel pretty good about how it went.
Well, the next presidential debate is still scheduled for October 15th, and it will be a town hall atmosphere. For our final question, I'd like to ask each of you what you hope to see at the next debate, and do you have any concerns about it happening since the president has tested positive for COVID-19? Matthew, I'll let you begin.
Okay, well, just to respond real quickly, Robin mentioned about the pandemic. Vice President Biden, Kamala Harris, when the president made a tough decision to shut the border down, of course he's going to allow U.S. citizens back into this country. Of course, we wouldn't have it any other way. But we shut the border down. We made a tough decision, and he made that call for the safety and security of the American people. When you contrast that to the 60 million people that contracted the swine flu in 2009 under Biden and Obama's leadership, I don't think so. The clear contrast is here. 11 million jobs are already back. But to answer your question on this, I think that there is a concern. And as long as the safety precautions are taking place like they were tonight, then I think that we can have another debate. Absolutely. The American people deserve to hear the two very different paths forward for this country that each of these, that the president and the vice president and the other candidate and Vice President Biden and Kamala Harris offer this country.
Robin?
I have to say I'm a little concerned about the town hall. We know that Donald Trump and that White House is basically a super spreader. The Amy Coney Barrett event was not entirely outside. It was also inside. There are numerous photos. You have what? I think it's up to 34 people connected to the White House now testing positive for corona. And I can tell you, Twitter's on fire tonight because one of the symptoms of coronavirus can be pink eye. So the whole notion, I understand that Vice President Pence had some eye bleed or something there, but it does not, it is certainly not beyond the realm of possibility that there are other people who are positive. So I agree. I would love to have the town hall debate. I think that forum would be really beneficial for the American people to see both Joe Biden and Donald Trump interact with an actual audience. But I am concerned about the safety of such an event. And I would agree that before I was in a room with Donald Trump, I'd want to know from an actual doctor that he does not have the coronavirus or is not at all positive.
And Mr. Buller, what do you hope to see at the debate? And do you have any concerns about it happening?
Well, I would like to see a debate. I actually think the town hall debates tend to be the most kind of enjoyable. I really do like to see the interaction. And I think that would be a great benefit to see both the president and the former vice president, getting that opportunity. But I do think it's very reasonable, and I actually think it's prudent to be concerned about the health not only of the president, but of the former vice president. And so if there is any concern that it would be potentially dangerous, then I think that should be the priority. If it's safe, then I'm looking forward to it.
All right, we have political contributor Richard Allen Bowler, Robin Walters with the Democratic Party, and Matthew Martin with the Republican Party. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And don't forget, we will have more from tonight's vice presidential debate, including a full wrap-up and more reaction tonight on 23 ABC News at 11. You can always get the latest updates on the election on our website, turnto23.com, and on our social media platforms. This special edition of 23 ABC News will be back in 30 seconds.